Okay, this is part 2 of the PowerPoint you began last week, and I'm going to go a little more deeply into mathematical processes. And you have your textbook assignment, which has a lot of information. You may find that you're seeing the same information in all 3 of these reading and viewing assignments. I hope so, because that would mean that you're getting the consistent message about math and about what matters in early childhood in math. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this PowerPoint, and then you'll have a PowerPoint reflection sheet like you did last week to fill in. But this is just to give you the directions so that it's really clear to you. I'm hoping these video directions help rather than having to read all the directions all the time. So you'll notice if we go through this PowerPoint that you're going to have a little more reading in this PowerPoint section to do. And what I'm actually going to ask you to do is I'll have in the reflection document an area for each slide that you can comment about something from the slide that you took away as information that's either new to you or that you feel is really important. Either way, what's new to you in here, and what's important if you already knew everything in here. And then a third category is what questions can I answer about any of this at all that you still have. So, because we have several more weeks of class left, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to do that. Math and science are sometimes areas early childhood teachers really struggle with in terms of how do you bring it into an early childhood space without just rote counting and kind of like the alphabet. How do you teach the alphabet without teaching letter of the week? So we're looking at more early childhood brain friendly ways to introduce this, but also overall to maintain an atmosphere of joy and respect for the young child's ability to explore and have questions on their own. We just need to provide the right spaces. So you'll see each of these slides has something you can read, and then there's also some links here that I'd like you to go ahead and link to. They're not long. And again, you'll just be going through and reading this and then making a comment about it. These are some practical examples. And then sorting is a big part of math in early childhood, but we need to allow children to sort things based on their own categories. We can teach them categories later on, but we need to let them, if you are doing sorting and you have a big box of buttons and you have some little boxes that they can put the buttons in, it's not yet appropriate to go and say, well, that button really wouldn't go there because it's blue and all the other buttons are black in this box. Just let them put the blue button in the box of black buttons. So you want to just let them experiment with categorizing and sorting. Okay, so that's a really important part of that. How many times do you do things? How many things can you do with one thing? So that's another experience of early operations. But again, we're not teaching that. We're letting them experience those things and just documenting what they do. It's just interesting to see what they're doing. Measurement is a really wonderful thing, not just measurement of size and weight, but the language of measurement becomes important. The rhythms of seasons and how we measure time. And for example, replacing the calendar with just noticing what's happening out the window and how it feels and what they see, and replace the clock with what's happening next, what's happening before and after. Birthdays, family events, community events, all of those measure time. And also really important rhythm and music and song and timing. You'll notice in a lot of the Waldorf pieces that I shared with you, math is really experienced first in your body. So you should never be counting, just counting into the air. You should be moving while you're counting. If you are in a kindergarten classroom, children should take a step for every number they count, either forwards, backwards, or maybe jump, or if they're jumping rope, something like that. So that's really an important part of measurement. Patterns in relationships, we talked about that a lot last week, but here's some more ideas about it that you should make sure that you're incorporating. So read those over carefully. We already have looked at Andy Goldsworthy, so you can skip that video, but go ahead and read what I've got here and comment about that, because it's more than just Andy Goldsworthy there. And here are some more sciences that have to do with math. So physics and math are really closely related. We really can't separate these things out, even though we do. They do not get separated out, hopefully, in the brain. They're more integrated because we're having lots of these experiences. So here are some more ways of looking at those. Please read these carefully. Here's some pictures of those. And then we also have the physics of sound, which really helps with number. You can have young children exploring with how many times they hit an instrument like a xylophone. Or if you don't have a xylophone, all you need is a cardboard box to let them drum on. You don't have to have fancy, expensive instruments. That's what we see here, basically. So I just want to make that really clear. But the number of sounds children hear, and we need to remember that young children, especially during COVID, they really did not hear much of a palette of sounds. They heard specific sounds only that were particular to the environment they were isolated in during COVID. So something that's happening for kids, young kids, is they're not outside to hear the natural sounds as much as we would need them or like them to be. So please remember that in your thinking about what activities you plan for them to do. So here's some chemistry stuff, which you've already looked at, but again, you really can't separate these languages from math. Here's astronomy, we've talked about that. All of these elements of kingdoms, we've talked about that. All of these are things that are very related to math, as I mentioned in the last week's session, so I'm not going to say too much more about that. Just go through these slides and read them. And then I've introduced something called racial socialization in the math and science curriculum. And if you haven't had any work in racial socialization yet in your coursework, I would like you to really pay close attention to this section. We're going to go more deeply into it in the coming weeks. So please read this over carefully, and also look at some of the things that are going on in the community in response to the issue of math and science in the area of racial socialization. So these are more projects and books, all kinds of things that address this issue. Who visits your classroom? Think about that in terms of this area. So here's your discussion question, which I will have you do in the reflection sheet. And you can ignore this. This is for, again, this was a training, so please ignore it. So basically, what you would want to do is on this for discussion page, stop after that. You don't need to do anything more. All right, I hope these directions